The Quiet Map of America, a bedtime historical story for a restless world. Most people fall asleep believing history is loud. Wars, presidents, revolutions, headlines. But the truth is gentler. History usually happens quietly, in kitchens lit by oil lamps, on dirt roads after sunset, in letters never mailed, and in choices made by ordinary people who never expected to be remembered. Tonight's story is one of those quiet histories. It is real in the way rivers are real, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, always shaping the land. If you were listening from an apartment in New York, a farmhouse in Iowa, a village in Ghana, or a city street in Europe, this story belongs to you too. So slow your breathing, let your shoulders rest, and listen. Part 1. The Man Who Drew at Night, 1791. In the winter of 1791, when the United States of America was still learning how to exist, a man named Samuel Whitaker sat alone at a wooden table in western Pennsylvania. The cabin was small. The fire was low. Snow pressed gently against the window like a listening ear. Samuel was not famous. He would never appear in textbooks. He owned no slaves, held no office, led no army. But every night, after his wife and children fell asleep, Samuel unfolded a piece of parchment and began to draw. Not pictures, maps. Not the kind sold in shops or printed by governments, but careful, handwritten maps of things most people ignored. He mapped where floods quietly returned every 20 years, which valleys stayed warm during winter storms, which roads disappeared after heavy rain, where travelers always ran out of food, where communities survived disasters while others vanished. Samuel was a surveyor by trade, but that was not why he drew. He drew because he had learned something early in life. Survival leaves patterns, and patterns tell the truth before history does. Samuel had been born in 1754, before America was a country at all. He grew up during a time when borders changed faster than people could understand them. As a boy, he watched settlers arrive hopeful and leave broken. He watched native trails ignored, then desperately followed. He watched promises made by men who never returned. His father died not in war, but in winter, because the wrong valley was chosen for a homestead. That lesson stayed with Samuel longer than grief. So he learned quietly. He listened more than he spoke. He measured rivers by memory. He memorized soil color, wind direction, bird migration. And at night, he drew. By 1791, America was young and restless. People moved west with dreams instead of plans. Land was sold faster than it was understood. Governments encouraged settlement, but offered little guidance on survival. Samuel noticed something unsettling. The same mistakes were happening again and again and again. Entire communities starving where maps said fertile. Homes collapsing where maps said safe. Trade routes failing where maps said efficient. Official maps showed ownership. Samuel's maps showed reality. One evening, a stranger knocked on his cabin door. The man wore a heavy coat and spoke carefully, as if words were expensive. "I was told you know the land better than the papers do." Samuel studied him for a moment. "I know what stays and what leaves." That night, Samuel unfolded his maps for the first time in front of another person. The stranger did not interrupt. He did not scoff. He only asked one question before leaving. "May others see this someday?" Samuel answered honestly, "I don't know if they're ready." They were not. Over the next decade, Samuel's maps would be ignored, borrowed, copied, and quietly altered. Some would save lives. Some would be buried. Some would resurface generations later without his name. Samuel never complained. He believed something simple. The land remembers, even when people don't. As the fire dimmed, Samuel rolled up his parchment and placed it inside a wooden chest. He did not know that this chest would outlive him. He did not know that it would cross rivers, wars, and centuries. He only knew this: if America was going to survive itself, it would need more than ambition. It would need quiet wisdom. And so he slept.
Part 2. The River That Refused to Obey, 1803. The river did not care about borders. It never had. In the spring of 1803, while men in distant rooms argued over treaties and land purchases, the Ohio River moved as it always had, slow, patient, and absolutely certain of itself. It curved where it wished, it rose when it chose, and every few decades it reminded people of an old truth. You can draw lines on paper, but water remembers older maps. That year, America was celebrating quietly. The Louisiana Purchase had just doubled the nation's size, though most citizens had no idea what that truly meant. Newspapers printed hopeful sketches of endless farmland and opportunity. Politicians spoke of destiny. But along the Ohio River, families were too busy watching the water. It had been raining for weeks. Not the dramatic kind of rain, no thunder, no lightning, but a steady, patient falling, like the ticking of a clock that never stopped. In a small settlement near present-day Wheeling, Virginia, a woman named Margaret Ellis stood barefoot on her porch, staring at the river's edge. She was 32 years old, with hands permanently rough from work and a calm face shaped by responsibility rather than joy. Her husband was away, trading grain upriver. Her 3 children slept inside. Margaret had lived by the river her entire life, and something felt wrong. The water was too quiet. It moved smoothly, without debris, without noise. That was never a good sign. She remembered her grandfather's words, spoken decades earlier. When the river goes silent, it's collecting its strength. Margaret did something unusual that morning. She packed. Not everything, just essentials: blankets, dried corn, a knife, the family Bible. She moved them uphill, behind the house, to a stand of oak trees. Her neighbors laughed. "The river's done this before," they said. "It always stops short." Margaret did not argue. She had learned something subtle in life. The people who survive are not louder, they are earlier. 2 nights later, the river rose 12 feet in 6 hours. Homes vanished like toys. Livestock screamed and disappeared. Boats broke loose and smashed into anything solid. Margaret woke her children calmly. She led them uphill through cold rain, never looking back. From the oak grove, she watched the settlement dissolve. At dawn, when the water finally slowed, Margaret counted the survivors. 27 families lived there. Only 9 remained. Days later, as relief wagons arrived and officials took notes,
A man in a dark coat asked to speak with her. He introduced himself as Thomas Avery, a junior clerk attached to a federal surveying team. "I'm collecting accounts, patterns, behaviors," he said. Margaret studied him carefully. "You're not here for sympathy," she said. Thomas smiled gently. "No, I'm here because someone told me to listen to people who move before they're told." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Who told you that?" Thomas hesitated. "An old map maker from Pennsylvania." That night, Thomas opened his satchel by candlelight and removed a folded parchment. It was one of Samuel Whitaker's maps. On it, faint but unmistakable, was a shaded curve along the Ohio River. A small handwritten note read, "Flood cycle returns here every 18 to 22 years. Quiet rise, no warning. Build uphill or move early." Thomas exhaled slowly. This was the third time Samuel's maps had proven right, and the third time officials had ignored them. Thomas Avery was not powerful. He had no authority to change policy, no voice in Congress, no influence over land sales. But he had something else: memory. He began copying the maps by hand, not officially, quietly. He shared them with river traders, frontier midwives, ferry operators, teachers, preachers, people who traveled, people who talked, people who remembered stories. He never put Samuel's name on them, not because he didn't respect him, but because he understood something dangerous was happening. Whenever maps contradicted prophets, they disappeared. By 1810, similar shaded curves appeared in places Samuel had never visited. New hands added notes, different ink, different handwriting, same wisdom. A quiet network was forming, not of rebellion, but of survival. No meetings, no organization, no manifesto, just shared understanding. Live where the land agrees with you. Leave before you are forced. Listen to those who have nothing to gain. Margaret Ellis rebuilt her life uphill. She never returned to the riverbank. Years later, when a new settlement formed below her land, she said nothing, except to her eldest son. "When the birds leave early," she told him, "pack." Far away, Samuel Whitaker grew older. His hands shook now when he drew, but he continued. He did not know about Margaret or Thomas or the copies of his maps traveling quietly through America. He only knew this: the land was still speaking, and somewhere, finally, people were listening. As night settles wherever you're listening from, remember this: the river never changed, only attention did. And tomorrow, another quiet pattern will reveal itself to someone willing to notice.
Part 3. The House That Knew the Wind, 1816. In the year 1816, people called it the year without a summer. No one knew why at first. Snow fell in June. Frost hardened the soil in July. Ash-colored skies dimmed the sun until noon felt like dusk. Crops failed across New England and the frontier alike. Families starved not because they were careless, but because the world itself seemed to have changed its mind. History would later explain it. A volcanic eruption half a world away, Mount Tambora, had thrown enough ash into the atmosphere to cool the planet. But in 1816, there were no explanations, only cold. On a ridge overlooking the Connecticut River Valley stood a house that did not collapse. It did not starve. It did not freeze. It belonged to a man named Abraham Cole, a carpenter by trade,
and a listener by habit. Abraham was not educated in schools. He had learned his craft by watching older men work and his understanding of weather by watching birds, smoke, and snow. Years earlier, Abraham had been shown something unusual, a map. Not a map of ownership, but of exposure. The parchment showed hills shaded according to wind direction and cold pooling. It marked where frost lingered longest and where it slid away like water. The map had no author's name, but in the corner, barely visible, were the initials SW. Abraham studied that map for months before he ever lifted a hammer. When he built his house, he did things neighbors found strange. He turned the long wall away from the prevailing wind. He lowered the roofline on the north side. He built thick interior walls, not for strength, but for warmth. He placed the hearth not in the center, but slightly offset, where heat would circulate before escaping. Most unusual of all, he built a narrow storage room under the floor, lined with stone. "The ground remembers summer," he explained when asked. People laughed. Then winter came and did not leave. In January, snow buried the valley. In March, ice still gripped the river. By May, children wore coats to plant seeds that never sprouted. Families abandoned homes and headed west, chasing rumors of warmth. But Abraham Cole stayed. His cellar kept potatoes from freezing. His walls held warmth. His roof shed snow instead of collecting it. His windows admitted light, but not wind. Neighbors came quietly, asking questions. Abraham answered honestly, but carefully. He never claimed genius. "I just listened," he said. One night in August, when frost dusted the fields like powdered sugar, a traveler arrived at Abraham's door. The man was thin, weathered, and older than he looked. His name was Jonathan Reed. He carried a leather satchel heavy with paper. Inside were maps. Not Samuel Whitaker's originals, but copies of copies, worn soft by hands and years. Jonathan had spent decades traveling. He followed stories of houses that survived storms, of barns that never collapsed, of wells that never ran dry. Wherever he went, he asked the same question: "Who taught you this?" The answer was always the same: no one. Jonathan stayed 3 nights. He slept by the hearth and listened to the wind test the walls. On the 3rd morning, he opened his satchel. "I believe these belong to you," he said, spreading the maps across the table. Abraham recognized them instantly. "Where did you get those?" he asked. Jonathan smiled faintly. "They get around," he said. The 2 men talked long into the night. About weather. About people who noticed patterns. About how governments chased expansion while families chased survival. Jonathan explained something Abraham had never considered. "These maps aren't instructions," he said. "They're conversations. Each generation adds a sentence." Abraham nodded. He understood. By the time Jonathan left, Abraham had his own notes. Simple observations. Cold pools settle here. Wind funnels through this gap. Stone stores warmth longer than wood. Nothing revolutionary. Everything life-saving. When summer finally returned in 1817, America had changed. Thousands had died. Thousands more had moved. Communities shifted like sand. But something else had shifted too, quietly. People began asking better questions. Not, is the land cheap? But, does the land forgive mistakes? Samuel Whitaker did not live to see this. He passed away peacefully in 1818, his maps carefully stored, his name largely forgotten. But his work had escaped him. It had become something larger, a way of seeing. Tonight, as you rest, remember this. The house that stands is not always the strongest. Sometimes it is simply the one that listened to the wind.
Part 4. The City That Forgot the Ground, 1837. Cities grow faster than memory. They rise with confidence, stacking brick upon brick, promise upon promise, believing height alone is wisdom. In 1837, the city of New York was bursting outward and upward. Ships crowded its harbor, streets filled with noise. Money moved faster than weather ever could. People believed the future lived there. But the ground beneath the city remembered something else. On Cherry Street, near the East River, lived a woman named Eliza Moore. She was a widow, a seamstress, and invisible to nearly everyone who passed her door. Her apartment sat low, too low, some said, just a few feet above the river at high tide. But it was cheap, and Eliza had learned to survive where others avoided. At night, after long days sewing coats for men who never noticed her hands, Eliza listened, not to voices, to vibrations. She had grown up on a farm along the Susquehanna River. She remembered how floors felt before floods, how walls whispered when water pressed nearby. In the city, the sounds were different, but the language was the same. In the spring of 1837, something felt wrong. The air was damp without rain. The river smelled heavier. And at night, Eliza felt a faint trembling beneath her floorboards, like breath held too long. She mentioned it to her neighbors. They laughed. "This is New York," they said. "Rivers don't scare cities." Eliza said nothing more. She began moving her sewing supplies upstairs each night. She stored food in waterproof cloth. She marked cracks on the wall with chalk, watching them widen. She was not preparing for panic. She was preparing for inevitability. That same year, the panic of 1837 struck the nation. Banks collapsed, jobs vanished, families lost everything overnight. People blamed speculation, policy, greed. But beneath it all, something quieter was happening. Infrastructure was failing. Poor drainage, overbuilt land, ignored floodplains. The city had expanded faster than it understood its own foundation. One night in October, a storm rolled in from the Atlantic. Wind howled through narrow streets like breath through teeth. Rain fell sideways, driven hard by the river itself. By midnight, water surged past docks and into basements. By dawn, entire blocks near the river were submerged. Eliza Moore was already gone. She had packed her belongings and left hours earlier, guided by nothing more than instinct, sharpened by memory. When she returned days later, her apartment was destroyed, but she was alive. Among the officials surveying the damage was a young civil engineer named Caleb Harlan. He was methodical, educated, and deeply unsettled. The damage followed patterns not shown on any official city map. Buildings on slightly higher ground survived. Streets built over old marshes collapsed. Cellars flooded where basements never should have existed. Caleb began asking questions, not of officials, but of residents. Most shrugged, some complained. One woman described how she felt the river coming. Caleb paused. "Who?" he asked. "Eliza Moore," someone said. "She listens." Caleb found Eliza sewing in a borrowed room uptown.
He expected superstition. Instead, he found precision. She described the changes she noticed: smells, vibrations, pressure. Caleb realized something profound. She was doing empirically what his instruments tried and often failed to do: listening to the ground. Weeks later, Caleb pulled out an old document he had inherited from his grandfather. A map, yellowed, hand-drawn, marked with shaded zones along rivers and coastlines. Initials in the corner: S.W. Caleb stared, heart racing. The flooded areas matched exactly. He began combining disciplines: engineering with observation, math with memory, data with intuition. Quietly, he adjusted designs, raised foundations, redirected drainage, refused certain building sites, earning ridicule and losing contracts. But buildings he designed endured, and slowly others noticed. Eliza Moore never became famous. She continued sewing, but when neighbors asked why her new room sat higher, farther from the river, she smiled gently. The ground tells you where to stand if you listen long enough. As cities grew louder, this quiet knowledge struggled to survive, but it did. Passed hand to hand, map to map, story to story. Because while cities forget, the ground does not, and neither do those who learns its language. As you rest tonight, remember, progress moves fast, wisdom moves slow, but only one of them lasts. Part 5. The Iron Roads and the Quiet Cost, 1851. By the middle of the 19th century, America no longer moved at the speed of horses. It moved at the speed of iron. Railroads stitched the continent together with a confidence that felt unstoppable. Towns bloomed overnight. Fortunes were made before breakfast and lost before dinner. Steam whistles echoed through valleys that had once known only birds and wind. People called it progress. The land called it pressure. In 1851, along a newly laid stretch of track in western Illinois, a man named Daniel Cooper kept a notebook in his coat pocket. Daniel was a railway inspector, officially tasked with checking measurements, bolts, and schedules. Unofficially, he watched the ground. He had grown up poor on the edge of a swamp that developers insisted was reclaimed. He had seen homes sink, crops rot, and families leave quietly at night. From an early age, Daniel learned a lesson no one taught in schools. Land does not forgive lies. Rail companies were in a hurry. They paid by the mile. They cut corners where no one looked. They trusted blueprints more than soil. Daniel noticed things others ignored. Tracks that curved slightly downhill where maps said flat. Sleepers that shifted after rain. Bridges that vibrated differently depending on the hour. He wrote everything down. Dates, weather, sound, especially sound. Metal spoke differently when it was about to fail. One afternoon, Daniel stood beside a stretch of track newly completed. The ground beneath it was dark and soft, despite weeks without rain. He knelt, pressed his palm to the earth, and frowned. A young foreman laughed. "You listening to dirt now?" he joked. Daniel stood slowly. "This track won't last 5 years," he said. The foreman waved him off. "By then, we'll be 10 miles west." That night, Daniel pulled out an old folded map. He had acquired it years earlier from a retired engineer in New York. It was not official. It showed floodplains, ancient riverbeds, and soil instability, places the land still remembered water. In the corner were faded initials, S.W. Daniel traced a finger along the Illinois line. The railroad followed the exact path of an ancient marsh. He wrote a report. It was polite. It was precise. it was ignored. 2 years later, a freight train derailed at that very spot. No lives were lost, but the damage was enormous. The company blamed faulty materials. Daniel knew better. As railroads expanded, so did shortcuts. Wooden bridges where stone was needed, compressed timelines, silenced inspectors. Daniel found himself increasingly isolated. His notes made him unpopular, so he began sharing them quietly, with conductors, with maintenance crews, with station masters who slept near the tracks. He taught them to listen, how to feel vibrations through boots, how to notice subtle changes in rhythm, how to tell when the land was disagreeing. One winter evening, Daniel met an elderly man at a station in Missouri. The man carried no luggage, only a worn leather satchel. Inside were maps, different hands, same language. The man smiled when Daniel recognized them. "You hear it too," he said. Daniel nodded. "I thought I was alone." The man shook his head. "None of us ever are." They spoke long into the night, about how progress demanded speed, about how speed punished silence, about how knowledge survived only when passed quietly. Before dawn, the man left. He did not give his name. He did not need to. By the end of the century, America's iron roads spanned the continent. They carried people, goods, dreams. They also carried accidents, exploitation, and forgotten warnings. But beneath the noise, a quieter tradition endured, one that did not fight progress, but insisted on understanding it. Tonight, as trains still move through darkness and sleepers rest beneath them, remember this: metal may conquer distance, but only respect conquers land.
Part 6. When Machines Learn to Hurry, 1906. The 20th century arrived without asking permission. It came with noise. Engines coughed awake before sunrise. Factories exhaled smoke like breath held too long. Cities stretched upward, no longer content to spread outward. People learned to measure time not by seasons, but by clocks nailed to walls. America was no longer listening. It was accelerating. In the spring of 1906, San Francisco shook. Not gently, not politely. The earth moved with authority. Buildings cracked open like books dropped from a shelf. Streets folded. Fires bloomed where gas lines ruptured. By nightfall, the city was no longer a place, it was an event. History would remember the earthquake. Few would remember what came before it. 3 years earlier, a woman named Lydia Chen had begun keeping a journal. Lydia worked as a translator for shipping companies along the West Coast. Her job required precision, patience, and silence, skills she had learned from her mother, who believed that the world spoke softly to those who waited. Lydia noticed patterns others dismissed. Small tremors that never made newspapers, cracks that appeared, vanished, then returned, doors that no longer closed evenly, wells that tasted faintly metallic. She wrote everything down, not because she expected disaster, but because she sensed imbalance. One evening, while translating an engineering report, Lydia paused. The document described a new warehouse foundation being built near the bay. Deep, heavy, efficient. But the soil description bothered her. She walked there the next day. She removed her shoes and stood barefoot on the ground. The sensation traveled up her legs like a held breath. She knew that feeling. Her grandmother had taught it to her decades earlier in a village far from America. When the earth tightens, her grandmother said, it is preparing to speak. Lydia tried to warn people. She spoke to supervisors. She mentioned concerns to engineers. She wrote letters. Most were polite. All were ignored. Earthquakes, she was told, were acts of God, not patterns. On April 18, 1906, at 5:12 a.m., the ground answered. Lydia survived because she had moved. She had chosen a small, flexible wooden house on higher ground, against advice, against convenience. After the shaking stopped, she walked through ruins. She recognized patterns immediately. Stone failed where wood bent. Heavy foundations cracked where lighter ones shifted. Areas built over filled land collapsed first. It was all there, written in the ground. In the weeks that followed, officials focused on rebuilding quickly, bigger, stronger, faster. Lydia focused on understanding. She joined relief crews, listening to survivors. Where were you standing? What did you feel first? What changed before the shaking? She filled notebook after notebook. One afternoon, an older man approached her camp table. He had been watching her work silently. "You listen like my father did," he said. He handed her something wrapped in cloth. Inside was a map, old, carefully drawn, annotated over decades, initials in the corner, S.W. Lydia did not recognize the name, but she recognized the method. She added her own notes. She marked fault lines not as dangers, but as conversations between pressure and release. She wrote, "The ground does not betray us. We betray our attention." As America rebuilt, much was forgotten. Speed returned, noise returned, confidence returned. But some knowledge moved quietly forward, into engineering schools, into carpentry traditions, into building codes written by people who had listened once and never stopped. Lydia never became famous. She returned to translation, but she taught her children something essential. She said, "Machines make us faster. Listening makes us safe." Tonight, as cities hum and lights glow far past sunset, remember, the earth still speaks. It always has. The question is not whether it warns us, but whether we are quiet enough to hear it. Part 7. The Years When Nothing Was Wasted. 1933. By 1933, America had learned how quickly noise could vanish. Factories stood silent. Banks locked their doors. Men who once shook hands with confidence now counted coins twice before spending one. The Great Depression did not arrive with explosions or storms. It arrived quietly, in empty lunch pails, in shoes worn thin at the heel, in the way people stopped making plans. And yet, during those years, something old returned: attention. In a small town outside Toledo, Ohio, lived a woman named Ruth Calder. She was 41 years old, a mother of 4, and known locally for fixing things no one else could. Radios that stopped humming, coats that had lost their shape, meals stretched impossibly far. People did not call it ingenuity, they called it necessity. Ruth's husband had lost his job at the glass factory. The savings were gone within months. But Ruth did not panic. She had grown up listening to her grandmother, a woman who had lived through shortages most people forgot. "Waste," her grandmother used to say, "is a luxury of people who think tomorrow is guaranteed." Ruth had listened. Every evening after the children slept, Ruth opened a small box she kept hidden beneath the floorboard. Inside were papers, old papers, notes written in different hands, diagrams of stoves modified to burn less fuel, sketches of shelving systems that kept food dry longer, instructions for repairing shoes with wire and resin. No names, no dates, but on some pages, faint initials appeared. S.W. Ruth did not know who Samuel Whitaker was. She only knew the ideas worked. She reorganized her kitchen. The stove vented heat into the walls before escaping. Shelves angled slightly so older food was used first. Water from washing vegetables was reused for cleaning floors. Soap scraps melted into new bars. Neighbors noticed. They asked questions. Ruth shared freely. "Knowledge isn't food," she said. "It doesn't run out." During the worst winter, Ruth took in 2 families whose homes had been lost. 8 children slept under one roof. No one froze, no one went hungry. They survived because nothing was wasted, not heat, not time, not attention. One afternoon, a man from the Works Progress Administration visited. He was cataloging best practices for household efficiency. Ruth showed him everything. He took notes. Weeks later, similar methods appeared in government pamphlets, simplified, stripped of origin, but effective. Ruth did not mind. The ideas were older than credit. Across America, similar things were happening. People learned again how to mend, how to share, how to store food properly, how to listen to seasons instead of markets. The maps, those quiet maps, did not disappear during the Depression. They multiplied. Written on scraps, passed verbally, embedded in habits. One night, Ruth's eldest daughter asked her a question. "Will things ever go back to normal?" Ruth paused. Then she answered honestly. "I hope not," she said. "I hope we remember this part." History often frames the Great Depression as suffering. It was. But it was also a moment when America learned something ancient. Survival is not about having more, it is about understanding enough. As prosperity eventually returned, many of these lessons faded, but not all. Some stayed quietly inside homes, inside families, inside habits passed down without explanation, and that was enough. As you drift towards sleep, remember, there are years when the world teaches loudly, and years when it teaches gently. The wise learn from both. Part 8. The Quiet Intelligence of Wartime, 1941 to 1945. When war arrived, it did not ask permission. It arrived in telegrams, in factory whistles blowing before dawn, in the sudden absence of familiar voices at dinner tables. America shifted quickly. Steel became ships. Factories became engines. Men became uniforms. But behind the noise of mobilization, another war was being fought, a quieter one, a war of attention, patience, and preparation. In Portland, Oregon, a young woman named Eleanor Price worked as a riveter by day. By night, she kept a notebook. It was not official. It was not classified. It was practical. Eleanor had been raised by an aunt who believed in writing things down. Memory fails, her aunt said. Paper remembers. So Eleanor wrote. She recorded how to stretch ration coupons without cheating, how to preserve vegetables without electricity, how to repair factory gloves using bicycle rubber, how to turn scrap wood into safe heating blocks. She learned quickly that wartime survival was not about heroics, it was about systems. The government taught people what to do, but people taught each other how to do it better. Eleanor lived in a boarding house with 7 other women. They pooled everything: soap scraps, fabric remnants, cooking grease. Nothing was wasted. One woman's broken shoe became another woman's patch. They learned to cook meals that felt abundant but used less. Soups layered with timing, not ingredients. Bread reused, not discarded. Bones boiled twice. The house smelled warm even during blackouts. On the wall of Eleanor's room hung a small pencil sketch,
a storage diagram. She had copied it from an older notebook she found at a thrift shop. No name, just lines and notes. It showed how airflow between shelves could prevent mold. The idea saved pounds of food that winter. Across the Atlantic, war raged loudly. At home, intelligence lived quietly. In Alabama, farmers planted victory gardens with layouts that minimized water loss. In New York, apartment dwellers timed laundry to reuse heat. In Chicago, tailors redesigned worn uniforms into civilian coats. People stopped asking, "What can I buy?" They asked, "What can I make last?" And in certain government offices, something curious occurred. Reports began circulating, not about weapons, but about households. Which homes consumed less fuel? Which neighborhoods shared efficiently? Which practices reduced strain on supply chains? Officials studied these patterns, not to credit anyone, but to replicate results. Some of the diagrams looked familiar. Some of the principles echoed ideas written decades earlier by men like Elias Turner and Samuel Whitaker, and others whose names history had not kept. No one mentioned them. The ideas had outgrown ownership. One evening, Eleanor received a letter from her younger brother stationed in Europe. He wrote about cold nights, about scarcity, about learning from locals how to insulate boots with newspaper and cloth. "Funny thing," he wrote, "they do it the same way we do back home." Eleanor smiled. She folded the letter carefully. Knowledge had crossed oceans without passports. When the war finally ended, people celebrated. Factories shifted again. Uniforms came off. Rations lifted. But something subtle changed. People had proven something to themselves. They could endure. They could adapt. They could cooperate without instruction. Eleanor closed her notebook for the last time in 1946. She placed it in a box with others like it. She did not label it. She did not expect it to be found. She simply believed, quietly, that someone, someday, would need it. History remembers wars for their battles, but survival is shaped elsewhere, in kitchens, in workshops, in notes written after midnight. As your breathing slows, remember, even in the loudest moments of history, the most powerful intelligence whispers. Part 9. The Comfort That Made People Forget. 1946 to 1969. After the war, America exhaled. Not all at once, but steadily, like a long breath held for too many years. Factories that once produced engines and artillery turned their hands toward refrigerators, washing machines, radios, and televisions. Suburbs spread outward like carefully planned promises. Lawns appeared where fields once stood. Driveways replaced dirt paths. Time itself seemed to accelerate. And with comfort came forgetting. In 1948, a former logistics analyst named Thomas Caldwell moved his family into a brand new development outside Cleveland, Ohio. The house was perfect. Central heating, insulated walls, a kitchen designed for efficiency. Thomas loved systems. He had helped design supply routes during the war, ensuring that nothing critical arrived too late or went missing. Now he studied his own home. He noticed how much energy was wasted. Heat escaping from corners, water running longer than needed, food spoiled simply because it was invisible at the back of a shelf. His wife laughed gently. "We're not at war anymore," she said. Thomas smiled, but he kept notes. In basements across America, similar notebooks appeared, not because of fear, but because habit had taught people that abundance could disappear. Television entered the living room. Commercials taught people to replace, not repair. Convenience became a virtue. Durability became old-fashioned. But some people felt uneasy. They sensed that something valuable was being traded. In Iowa, a school teacher named Margaret Sloan taught her students arithmetic using household examples. She asked them how long a light bulb lasted, how much water a faucet wasted if left dripping, how many meals could be made from leftovers. Parents complained. "They're teaching them to worry," they said. Margaret adjusted her lessons quietly. She continued anyway. The 1950s shined brightly. Cars grew longer, appliances grew louder, waste became invisible. Landfills expanded beyond the edge of maps. But at the edges of towns where systems met reality, small thinkers noticed problems. In California, engineers observed that air conditioning increased power grid strain. In Arizona, builders saw that certain house designs trapped heat unnecessarily. In New England, fishermen noticed changes in storage practices affected spoilage rates. The solutions were not glamorous. They were small. Orientation of windows, material choices, daily routines. These ideas rarely made headlines. They circulated through trade journals, local workshops, and community meetings. They lived in diagrams and margins. They survived because they worked. Thomas Caldwell grew older. His notebooks filled shelves. His children moved away. He never published anything. But one day in 1967, a young city planner visited him. The planner had found Thomas's wartime reports. They talked about neighborhoods, about efficiency, about designing systems that respected human behavior. Thomas gave him a folder. "Just observations," he said. By the late 1960s, cracks appeared beneath the comfort. Urban unrest, resource strain, environmental warning signs. America had learned how to build, but it had not learned when to stop. Some people felt it. They began looking backward, not in nostalgia, but in search. They wanted the quiet intelligence that had once guided survival. They wanted systems that made sense again. Margaret Sloan retired in 1969. On her final day, a student asked her why she always talked about small things. She answered gently, "Because history turns on them." As night settles in and your thoughts drift, remember, comfort is a test, and not everyone passes. Part 10. When Systems Began to Fail, 1970 to 1989. The first signs did not feel like a crisis. They felt like inconvenience. A longer line at the gas station, a higher utility bill, a product that broke sooner than expected. America had grown used to smooth systems, and smooth systems hide weakness until pressure arrives. In 1973, the oil embargo hit. Gasoline became rationed, prices spiked, tempers flared. People waited in cars with engines off, radios murmuring confusion. They argued about politics. But the real lesson was quieter. Dependency had replaced resilience. In Detroit, an auto engineer named Franklin Reyes watched assembly lines slow. He had spent years optimizing output. Now he studied fragility. He noticed how one missing component halted everything. He began mapping failure points, not for cars, for cities. At home, Franklin experimented. He installed thermal curtains. He reduced water pressure without discomfort. He modified appliances to draw power in shorter bursts. Neighbors thought he was eccentric,
But when blackouts rolled through neighborhoods, his lights stayed on longer. Across the country, similar adjustments occurred. In Texas, homeowners learned passive cooling again. In Maine, people returned to layered insulation. In California, architects revisited forgotten design principles. Books appeared with titles like Appropriate Technology and Small is Beautiful. They sold modestly, but their ideas traveled far. The 1980s brought speed, computers, just-in-time manufacturing, global supply chains. Efficiency soared, resilience dropped. Few noticed. In New Jersey, a warehouse manager named Linda Cho tracked inventory flows. She realized companies were shaving margins too thin. One disruption could cascade. She warned her supervisors. They nodded. They did nothing. At home, Linda kept meticulous systems. She rotated supplies. She maintained tools. She repaired instead of replacing. She did not call it preparedness. She called it respect. Government agencies ran simulations. Some reports were quietly shelved. They suggested that households with simple adaptive habits weathered disruptions far better than those with complex dependencies. The conclusion was uncomfortable. It implied that progress had made people fragile. Franklin Reyes retired in 1988. In his final memo, he wrote, "Systems fail where humans forget how they work." No one quoted it, but someone archived it. As the decade closed, America felt confident again. Markets rose, technology dazzled. But beneath the surface, something ancient waited, the next test. As you rest now, breathing slow and steady, remember, failure rarely announces. Part 11. The Age of Speed and Shallow Knowing, 1990 to 2019. The 1990s arrived quietly, almost politely. No ration lines, no blackouts, no shortages that demanded attention. Instead, there was speed. Information moved faster than thought. Products arrived faster than curiosity. Solutions appeared before problems were understood. In America, an era knowing how mattered less than knowing where to click. In 1994, the internet opened a door that never closed again. Knowledge multiplied. Wisdom thinned. People could find answers instantly, but fewer people understood systems deeply enough to question those answers. In Seattle, a software tester named Daniel Brooks noticed something unsettling. Every update fixed one thing and broke three others. Complexity was growing faster than comprehension. He began keeping notes, not about code, but about life. How often systems failed when users were removed from understanding. How dependence increased anxiety. How convenience eroded confidence. Daniel remembered his grandfather, a man who could repair anything, a man who trusted his hands. Daniel could barely fix a chair. Across America, similar realizations surfaced quietly. Parents no longer taught children how things worked because things no longer looked like they could be opened. Devices were sealed, processes hidden. Life became opaque. In Florida, hurricane seasons grew harsher. In California, wildfires burned longer. In New York, a single power failure darkened millions of homes. Each event revealed the same truth. Modern life was efficient, but brittle. Emergency responders noticed patterns. Households that had basic systems, manual tools, stored water, practiced routines recovered faster. Not because they were extreme, but because they were attentive. Daniel began teaching evening workshops, simple ones. How to reduce energy dependence, how to store food intelligently, how to understand, not fear, systems. Attendance was small, but consistent. People were tired.
not of work, of not understanding their own lives. By the 2010s, warnings grew louder. Climate models, infrastructure reports, supply chain analyses, but they competed with entertainment. Urgency drowned in noise. Daniel stopped teaching in 2018. Before he left, he wrote a sentence on the board. "Speed hides fragility." Someone photographed it. It circulated briefly online, then vanished. And then, history cleared its throat.
Part 12. The Return of Quiet Intelligence, 2020 to present. The world slowed, not by choice, by necessity. Supply chains snapped, hospitals strained, shelves emptied. People stared at screens in disbelief. How could this happen? They asked. But some people already knew. In 2020, during lockdowns and shortages, something ancient resurfaced. People baked bread. They repaired furniture. They grew food. They asked neighbors for help. They rediscovered small competence. Across America and beyond, individuals began documenting again. Not influencers, observers. They shared how to store water safely, how to reduce household waste, how to stay calm during disruption, how to live smaller but stronger. Somewhere in northern Pennsylvania, a researcher uncovered an old notebook, leather-bound, smoke-scented, written by a man who had asked the same questions 147 years earlier. His name was Elias Turner. His ideas felt disturbingly current. The ledger traveled, not physically, digitally. Its principles appeared everywhere, in videos, guides, community workshops, often unattributed, always effective. People did not call it survivalism, they called it smart living. And something else happened. People slept better. Not because the world became safe, but because they felt capable again. The great secret of history is this: progress is not linear, it is cyclical. We forget, we remember, we forget again. But each time, someone writes things down. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, remember, you come from a long line of quiet thinkers, people who survived not by force, but by understanding. And that intelligence is still alive, waiting in you.